I'm Julie Mason. So pleased to welcome back to the show Pete Buttigieg. He serves as your 19th Secretary of Transportation. He tweets at Secretary Pete. Well, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful to have you back. Now, the situation in Hawaii is very dire. Does your department have a role in helping out?
We do. The president has made clear that every part of the federal government needs to be doing everything we can to support the people of Maui in recovery and for the road ahead, especially those most impacted. One thing that we are able to do as a department is make available what's called Quick Release Emergency Relief Funds. This goes through our Federal Highway Administration. It helps, in this case, the Hawaii Department of Transportation deal with some of the costs that they incurred dealing with the immediate wake of the wildfires. We also have our FAA with temporary flight restrictions that are helping to facilitate some of the search and rescue missions that took place, and work with airlines to help get them the flexibility that's really needed to help respond. And our transit administration is in touch with the folks in Maui as well, trying to make sure that they have the support they need as they're providing movement services that are going to be required. It's going to be a long road to rebuilding and recovery, but we're going to be with the people who are impacted every way that we can, and this recent announcement of $3 million is just one part of that.
Good to know. In the meantime, the president I want to say just last week, with Speaker Pelosi and others celebrating the one-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act at the White House. How does that work for your agency? You must have gotten a bunch of that money.
We're involved in particular in following through on some of the commitments around electric vehicles and helping people more affordably participate in the new energy economy that this is going to unleash. We're already at work on this through the infrastructure law, getting those chargers out there, but this really supercharges a lot of that, no pun intended. Yeah. And the most exciting thing to me is seeing the job creation going on. We have already seen $110 billion in private investments, announcements from companies that are in clean energy manufacturing just in the last year. And I'll tell you, I've heard of many cases where a company was deciding whether to create those jobs and place those dollars in the United States or do it in some other country. And we landed that investment, landed those jobs specifically because of the policies in the IRA that are helping to make us more competitive. They're also directly lowering people's costs. A lot of that's happening on the utility side. But again, on the transportation side, the fact that consumers can save up to $7,500 when they're purchasing qualifying electric vehicles is just one. It's not just part of what we're trying to do on climate and do the right thing there, but it's just part of the overall effort to make the cost of living in America more reasonable and more affordable, taking those thousands of dollars off of the upfront cost of those EVs. Also knowing that for Americans who choose to go electric, there's a savings that comes with that for the rest of the time they have the vehicle because of the savings on gas or diesel, and also maintenance because they tend to require fewer repairs. They just have less moving parts and less things they can break than a traditional gas car.
What do you make of states like Texas, which, for example, is imposing a new registration fee, $200 a year, on electric vehicle drivers to make up the loss from gasoline taxes? They're making it harder.
Well, I respect the fact that every state's got to fund its roads. And, the idea of a gas tax is that it's a pretty good way, or at least it used to be a pretty good way, to make sure that people are paying into the system about as much as they drive. Obviously, if you don't use any gas, that's not true anymore. And so if you want to have a model where you kind of pay as you go, and the more you use the roads, the more you pay into them, then you need some way to do that. This is one way to do it, but far from the only one. There are other mechanisms that could connect to vehicle miles traveled or other ways to do it. I'll tell you, at the federal level, we are not introducing any new fees or any new costs. Quite the reverse. Again, we're acting to take costs down and cut costs off of the purchase of a vehicle. But, even Texas is certainly participating in the grant program we have going to create these electric vehicle chargers, because I think when you strip away the politics, they understand that jobs are at stake. After all, one of the most high-profile employers in Texas is Tesla, which makes electric vehicles. Just one example of how job creation and the clean energy economy, including in places like Texas, those things really go hand in hand.
My guest, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, that was quite a trip to Alaska you took. Can you tell us about it?
Extraordinary, fascinating. I had never been to Alaska, although we certainly have worked with the state on a number of issues. And until you go there, even if you look at it on a map, it is really hard to grasp the proportions of that state. From the southeast to the southwest end of the Aleutian Islands, that's about the same distance as from Savannah, Georgia to Phoenix, or maybe even to Las Vegas. It's an extraordinarily big state with very unique needs. A lot of people, in fact, I believe nearly half of the people in Alaska live in a community that doesn't even have a connection by road to the rest of the state or the rest of the country. So aviation is uniquely important. Ferry systems are uniquely important. And I spent time in north of the Arctic Circle with Senator Dan Sullivan, talking with tribal leaders and aviation folks up there. I was with Senator Murkowski on a ferry that's the main way to get the community of Haines, which we visited, and really appreciated the bipartisan work that we've been able to do with the Alaska delegation. They have their House member, Mary Peltola, is a Democrat. Their two senators are Republicans, but we're all pulling in the same direction when it comes to infrastructure funding and making sure that everything from ports to airports to roads gets their due. And if you live in a place like Alaska, you really live and breathe these transportation issues.
Learning about healthy fish passage. What an education up in Alaska. Wonderful state.
You get a job like Secretary of Transportation, you have no idea some of the issues you're going to take on. And yeah, one of them is fish. So it turns out that, these fish culverts, the way they cross under the highways, it's a big issue. And thanks to the infrastructure package, we have funding to fix this. This is important not just in Alaska, but the Pacific Northwest, really many parts of the country where fisheries are a very important part of the economy. And we've got to make it easier for these fish to get where they're going. It might sound like a quirky thing, but it's very important for a lot of folks, and I'm glad we can do our part. We just announced about $300 million in funding that's going to create jobs and really safeguard these fisheries for the future.
Finally, Mr. Secretary, Labor Day is approaching. Last year, I seem to recall, bit of a mess. What's this year going to look like?
Well, so far this year, we've seen, unlike last year, it's been below average in terms of flight disruptions, and I'm looking to the airlines to do everything they can to keep it that way. We're certainly going to be doing the same on our end at the DOT. We know nobody controls the weather, but airlines have to do their part. We're doing our part, and a lot of this is making sure that if a disruption does happen, passengers are taken care of. Just compared to a year ago, we've seen a major increase in passenger rights. We've pushed very hard to create more passenger protections. If you're going to be one of those many, many travelers taken to the skies over Labor Day weekend, I'd encourage you beforehand to go to flightrights.gov. That's a website we set up to learn more about what you can insist on for the airlines if they leave you stranded. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that there are good outcomes and to keep up the improvements that we've seen compared to just 1 year ago.
Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. He tweets at Secretary Pete. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Appreciate speaking with you.
Take care.
You too. Talk to you soon.